Please subscribe to the channel and stay with me. This story unfolds quietly, but every moment matters. My wife mocked me in public the night the river smelled of rain and roasted chestnuts, and the city lights of Milan trembled on the water like they were afraid to look at themselves. We were at a company gala in a renovated palazzo near Navigli. Brick arches, white linen, and waiters who moved like shadows. She stood with her colleagues, laughing too loudly, a glass of Prosecco lifted like a crown. I joined the circle, placed a hand at the small of her back, and she leaned away. "Careful," she said, not quietly. "You'll wrinkle your cheap jacket." There was a ripple of laughter. Someone coughed. Someone else looked at their phone. I smiled, not because it didn't hurt, but because I had learned the value of not reacting. My father taught me that in our small apartment outside Bergamo, where arguments were settled with silence and consequences, not shouting. He had been humiliated by my grandfather for years, passed over in the family business, treated like a clerk instead of a son. When my grandfather finally fell ill, my father did not confront him. He took over the contracts, spoke to the partners, and when the will was read, everything had already changed. "End the game," my father used to say, "before they realize you're playing." So I smiled that night and said nothing. But I had been noticing things long before that gala. The new password on her phone, the way she angled the screen away when messages arrived, the sudden interest in yoga classes that ended too late and smelled too much like men's cologne when she came home, the way she corrected my stories in front of friends, turning me into a footnote in my own marriage. And then there was Marco, her regional director, handsome, careful, always too familiar. I had seen the way his hand lingered at her elbow, the way she tilted her head when he spoke. Nothing obvious, nothing provable, just enough to make you feel foolish for suspecting anything at all. After the gala, she didn't apologize. She never did anymore. "You embarrassed yourself," she said, kicking off her heels. "Don't sulk." "I'm not," I replied, and I wasn't lying. I was thinking. Over the next weeks, I watched. I noted patterns. Tuesdays and Thursdays, late. Saturdays, team lunches that lasted into evening. I didn't follow her. I didn't check her phone. I did something better. I paid attention to the world around her. I spoke to a colleague who handled travel reimbursements. Casually, asked how conferences were booked now, if policies had changed. I spoke to the concierge in our building, who mentioned seeing Marco's car more than once on evenings when I was away on business. I spoke to a bartender near Porta Genova, who remembered her laugh, remembered the way she leaned into a man who tipped too much and asked for the same table. Still, suspicion is not proof, and I needed proof, so I waited for the right opening. It came in the form of her mother's birthday in Lake Como, a family weekend at a villa owned by her uncle. Sunlight on water, polite smiles, old resentments disguised as jokes. Her family never liked me. I wasn't for money. I wasn't loud. I wasn't useful to their image. At dinner, her sister joked about my job, about how support roles were sweet but not ambitious. My wife laughed. I smiled. After dessert, I excused myself and went to the study. Her uncle's house had cameras, mostly for show, but also because he didn't trust anyone. I had helped him set up the network years earlier. He never changed the passwords. I didn't watch anything that night. I didn't need to. I only confirmed what I already knew. When, where, and how often. When we returned to Milan, I began preparing. I spoke to a lawyer first, quietly, then to an HR consultant who specialized in internal investigations, then to a journalist who owed me a favor from years ago, when I had saved her from a lawsuit by finding a missing contract buried in an archive no one else had bothered to open. I gathered emails from shared cloud folders my wife had forgotten about, calendar invites mislabeled as client briefings, hotel receipts submitted to the company under project codes that didn't exist. And still, I said nothing. At home, she continued as she always had, sharp, dismissive, confident in my passivity. She corrected me in front of friends. She joked about my clothes, my car, my simple tastes. Each remark was a brick in a wall she thought would protect her. Then came the company's quarterly town hall. Hundreds of employees in a glass auditorium, executives on stage, applause that sounded like rain on plastic. My wife sat 3 rows from the front, Marco beside her. I took a seat in the back. When the CEO finished speaking about integrity and values, I stood. "I have a question," I said, and my voice carried farther than I expected. The room turned. "I'd like to know," I continued, "what the company's policy is on supervisors using corporate funds for personal relationships with subordinates." There was a murmur. The CEO hesitated. My wife's face drained of color. I didn't wait for an answer. "I've already submitted documentation to HR and to the board," I said calmly, "including travel records, email correspondence, and expense reports connected to Mr. Marco Rinaldi and my wife, Sofia Conti." Her name echoed in the room like something dropped and broken. Marco stood halfway, then sat again. People stared. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "I also sent the same materials to the press," I added, "because transparency matters." Security approached me, but I had already said what I needed to say. By the end of the day, Marco was suspended. By the end of the week, he was gone. By the end of the month, the company announced a restructuring that quietly removed several managers who had known and stayed silent. At home, Sofia tried anger first. "How could you humiliate me like that?" she shouted. I looked at her, really looked, and realized how long it had been since she had spoken to me without contempt. "You mean like at the gala?" I asked. Then she cried. Then she begged. Then she blamed me for being distant, for being boring, for not keeping her entertained. She told me about her father, about how she had learned early that admiration was currency, that power meant safety. I listened. I always did. But listening does not mean forgetting. Her family called. Some angry, some embarrassed, some suddenly polite. Her sister accused me of destroying her career. Her mother asked if we could handle this privately. "We did," I said. "For years." I moved out 2 weeks later, quietly. Took only what was mine. The divorce was not dramatic. It was cold, procedural, and final. The apartment went on the market. Friends chose sides. Most chose convenience. Months passed. Milan moved on. It always does. One evening, I ran into Sofia at a cafe near Brera. She looked smaller, tired, dressed without the sharp confidence she once wore like armor. "You planned it," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Did you ever love me?" "I did," I said. "I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your choices." She nodded, as if she had expected that answer. As I walked home, the city felt lighter. Not kinder, not softer, just honest. My father called that night. "I heard what you did," he said. And a pause. "Your grandfather would have respected it." I hung up and stood on my balcony, watching the trams glide through the streets like slow, glowing veins. Revenge, I learned, does not have to be loud. It does not have to be cruel. Sometimes it is simply removing the curtain and letting people see what was always there. And sometimes the greatest punishment is not what you do to them, but what you stop doing for them.